Welcome back to Seddon Park in Hamilton. I'm delighted to say, as promised throughout the morning session, we're joined by ECB Chief Executive Richard Gould to talk all matters ECB and, in fact, world cricket and the 100 and some of your questions that you've been sending in to us as well. Richard, thank you very much indeed for your time. How long have you been in the country?
I've been in the country probably about 10 days now, 8 or 9 days. It's a great first time I've been out here for a test series. My mum and dad are here, and my dad used to do stuff on talkSPORT, so he's in the back of the box, which is fun. And my brother is also out here. He's a coach with a football coach with AFC Auckland, so he's headed off to Melbourne today for a game tomorrow in the A-League.
Bobby Gould is actually in the back of the commentary box. I'm not sure you can see him on the cricket YouTube channel. Richard, let's talk about some of the issues you were talking to the press about yesterday. There has been a lot of talking about the revised pay structure for the 100, and there's been criticism from the PCA, Professional Cricketers Association, interim Chief Executive Daryl Mitchell. So basically, to simplify, there are 6 bands, aren't there, in each franchise. The top band has seen an increase of the salary from £125,000 to £200,000. Band 2 has been increased from 100 to 120,000. But then, comparatively, minimal increases for bands 3, 4, 5 and 6. And I think it's fair to say that the PCA are saying that the English players will be the ones with the minimal increases, whereas the big overseas stars will get the big bucks. And they're not happy about that.
No, we work really closely with the PCA, and I can understand where some of the frustrations come from, because sometimes we have to make decisions which won't keep all of the members happy. We've got clearly both men and women that play in the 100 alongside each other. Last year we were able to put an increase into the women's side of about £800,000. There wasn't an increase in the men's side. This year we wanted to try and put additional revenue in. You may be aware that we've got some investor discussions going on to bring additional investment into the 100, and when that happens, we think that the salaries will go up further notches. And so the approach this year is kind of an interim position to try and make sure that we can stay at the top of our game and continue to attract really good talent. In the women's game, we've been successful in the 100 in bringing many of the best players in the world. But that hasn't been replicated quite so much in the men's tournament, and therefore when we're trying to get the best talent across the world, although I have to say a lot of the best talent is English talent at the moment. You know, there's 75 English qualified players that played in the franchise tournaments last year. Next best is Pakistan at 45. So yeah, we're going to be paying more money to try and ensure that we retain and attract the best talent. We have to do that because we have to be fair to our broadcasters, our sponsors, our fans. If we don't have one of the best tournaments in the world, the whole game will suffer. So yeah, we've had to make some pretty tough decisions, but we're also very hopeful that when the investment lands, we're not counting our chickens yet, but when that lands, we'll have a whole host of new and exciting owners and initiatives that will allow further investment down the line.
I'm not holding Australia up as the example for everyone to follow, but it is a fascinating comparison that in Australia the Big Bash runs concurrently in the height of summer, and it seems to be able to stand on its own 2 feet even when there are test series going on and the national team are playing. And in fact, many of the best Australian players, biggest name players, have played very little, and in some cases have never played in the Big Bash. So how do they manage it, and why are Cricket Australia still able, after all these years, to retain ownership of all their franchises, whereas the 100, it would appear, does need to be ring-fenced, and with no international cricket at the same time, and the franchises are going to be sold. So what is the difference?
I think it's fascinating when you look across the world. Each geography has its own unique way of doing things. The SAT 20 is a good example of that, what happens in the West Indies also. in England, Test cricket is by far and away the most valuable part of the game that we've got, and we want to have the availability of all of our best players playing in Test cricket. But there is crossover, significant crossover, and we don't want to deny our players the opportunity also to play in the 100, which can be very, very lucrative for them. And in addition to that is a really important part of our game going forward. The investment that's going to hopefully come in will effectively underwrite the county system, for example, I think for the next 20 to 25 years. It will allow reduction in debt, it will allow investment in player pathways, investment in grounds, and all of that will feed back into to benefit the whole game.
So how do Australia do it? How does the Big Bash survive, and how does Cricket Australia manage to retain ownership of their franchises? And
I don't know if that's their strategy going forward. I understand that they might be looking at other options in terms of increasing geographical spread, but we recognise that we're in a global marketplace now. So if you look at other competitions that we are going up against in the English summer, whether they're in the United States or whether in the West Indies or in Sri Lanka, there are a whole plethora of other competitions, and we need to make sure that we defend our game, and frankly that we are the best tournament globally in our window, and to do that we want to bring in investors, and we've got some fascinating discussions. Clearly the excellence of the IPL, but also more globally, literally global leaders in sport from football to American sport, and for us it's very exciting if we can bring those sorts of partners into the game and take the game to other levels.
when you say protecting the English game, you referring to the county championship?
Yeah, the county championship, but also the counties themselves. We've got a very strong recreational game in the country. 5,500 clubs. We see participation in English cricket growing largely through women and girls cricket, which is extremely important for us. So we've got a big pool of players out there, and then they generally come through the 18 counties, both men and women, that then take that talent to the next level. So we've got a really very, very strong pathway. We think in England that's a unique advantage for us, and frankly we want to invest more in it, and protecting our members and ensuring that they're properly capitalised and have the right levels of investment so that they can take the game forward, we think is good.
So the non-issuing of non-objection certificates for players to go and play in tournaments around the world which clash with the English season is first of all, is it enforceable? We're talking about there's a number of tournaments, aren't there? I mean, there's the Pakistan Super League, although they've moved now to alongside the IPL, so that will clash with the early English season. There's Major League Cricket in the States. I don't suppose they'll be very happy about not having any access to English players. The CPL, Caribbean Premier League, I think also the Bangladesh Premier League. So you're saying that English county cricketers can't go and play in those tournaments apart from the IPL, and I know that the rest of the world sings or dances to the tune of the IPL. Obviously the players aren't particularly happy about that, are they?
No, there is a lot more nuance in the way that you've summarised it. We've issued over 80 non-objection certificates already this winter to allow players to go and play overseas. And we will continue doing that during the English summer, but we will protect our game. So a white ball player, for example, so generally you're either a white ball contract or you've got a multi-format contract. White ball contract players can go and play in other tournaments around the world in the English summer, provided they don't clash with our own tournaments, because our own tournaments are really important to us. And if we do, but however, if they choose not to have a contract with the county and they want to be a complete global freelance, that's fine. They can do that. They can do that too. But if they're contracted to play in our competitions, then we'd encourage them to play in our competitions. And so I think there will be more discussions that take place where you'll have a small handful of players who will be perhaps largely white ball specialists but have some red ball in their contract. Those are the discussions that will need to take place. Do they want to go and play in the PSL? If they do, then they just need to speak to their counties and work through. Have we got a white ball contract or is it a multi-format contract? Because unashamedly, we are going to protect our championship as well. We don't want to lose all of our. We don't want to lose a large swathe of players that are multi-format contracts. Perhaps players that have got the potential to go and play Test cricket later on down the line. We want to try and protect that.
I found myself going back to the Australian example, and I don't know how this happened, but it is intriguing. And as I say, I'm not holding them up to be the standard bearer. What has been really interesting there, though, is their identification of different markets, or trying to anyway, and establishing different media partners, rights issues, I suppose. So they've got free-to-air cricket. They've got 3 radio stations, and obviously there's a little bit of a vested interest here. talkSPORT would like to stay involved, but they've identified, or tried to, different sets of eyes and ears, and they've opened it up. Now I think there are 3 ball-by-ball services on radio and on television as well. As I said, they've got free-to-air. They have a mix between free-to-air and Fox TV. Is that a bid to stay financially healthy, or are they actually actively opening up the market, and is that something you would consider?
We want to get to the broadest and largest audience possible. Sometimes that will clash with the business models that you may see from broadcasters, whether that's with the ICC and their models or elsewhere. And I do find it interesting when you look around the world. You take India as a great example. Pay-per-view, paid broadcast is just not a thing in India. All of the money that's being generated for Indian cricket and indeed global cricket by the time it trickles down is all coming from the advertising market. Whereas in the UK and probably America, it's more subscription services that deliver that. But for us, it's important that we have a real mix. As I said earlier, I've really enjoyed listening to the coverage on talkSPORT during the first test and previously, and I think talkSPORT does an amazing job and gets us out again to a perhaps sometimes a new and a different audience. And the more we can do that, the better. Clearly, though, that we have to raise money as well as a governing body. There's no good being a governing body that's not able to financially support your members and your players. And so for us, it's just working through that balance.
I said that we talk global game as well, and of course, apart from the ECB, you do sit on the ICC Chief Executives Committee, and so what's happening with the Champions Trophy, and also your thoughts on the World Test Championship?
Yeah, the Champions Trophy due to take place in Pakistan early in the new year, and obviously there have been discussions as to whether India will travel. We're waiting for final announcement. There's been a little bit of media speculation in the last 6 or 7 hours or so, which seems to indicate that a hybrid model is about to be finally agreed and signed off, which would mean that some games are played in Pakistan and some games are played in Dubai, those concerning India. And that looks as if that's the most pragmatic solution. And look, we really need India and Pakistan playing in these tournaments because they generate so much worldwide and global interest. So we hope that hope we can find an adequate solution because they contribute so much.
And the World Test Championship, I mean, we've got this beautiful site in front of us at Seddon Park here with maybe it's my imagination, but there do seem to be a lot of families and children, young children, who come and watch Test cricket in New Zealand. Maybe it's because of the grass banks and just the setup of the stadiums, but it doesn't seem that, I mean, Test cricket's very well attended, best attended in England than anywhere else. But would you like to see more of a family environment at Test cricket in England?
I think when you look here, it's a really good family environment because you've got your grass banks and you've got place for the kids to roam, and some of them are jumping on the beanbags and having a lovely day, and then and then going on the outfield, and it's wonderful to see. I think in England all of our test match venues have got their own unique identity. I mean, there was a test match that finished earlier in the summer, finished in 2 days in England, and Lords were brave enough to let the crowd go out there. It's a slightly different issue when you've got north of 30,000 people in the ground, but I think the test attendances on this tour have been outstanding. I think the test game globally is in really good health. Everyone has been talking about the franchise tournaments pushing other things to the margins. That's not what we're seeing in Test cricket. India are playing Australia in a 5-test series in Australia for the first time in 28 years, something like that. We've got the World Test Championship to look forward to in the summer, which have been amazing occasions at the Keir Oval, and next year the final is going to be at Lords. That will be truly a great event.
The World Test Championship really intrigues me. You're listening to Richard Gould, by the way, the ECB Chief Executive. In my experience, and indeed it's not personal experience, it's what I've been told by, it's revitalised the game in countries like Sri Lanka, New Zealand, even the Caribbean, South Africa. And there's more of an interest in Test cricket than there's been for decades. Can you imagine if it was a league that people recognised and everyone played each other in the same number of games? Can you imagine what effect that might have?
Yes, but then pragmatism hits. What I find, again, fascinating is when we're talking about fitting all the various competitions in, the very first things that go in the long-term diary are the test matches between England, India and Australia. We have that forecast out beyond sort of 2031 now. That is the bedrock of global cricket, and all of the other tournaments, whether they're ICC or the various franchise tournaments, then have to fit in and around that. But the World Test Championship has its foibles, but I think it's a very good initiative. We'll always look to seek to refine it where we can to make it ever more competitive, but it results in an amazing final that every player would want to play in.
Final one, I think you probably need to go off, you've got other commitments. I think that even if there is still divided opinion about the men's 100, the women's 100 has been an unqualified success, I think, and probably is the leading women's tournament. The Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket, the ICEC, made a recommendation, I think it was a recommendation, that there should be equal pay by 2025. Is that, I mean, obviously that's not going to happen. I think the women's 100 teams are going to be paid in the region of 3 times, or earn 3 times less than the men. And the women's game is growing, I think, massively and quicker than ever before. Is equal pay on the radar?
We'd like to get there. That's where we want to get to. We want to demonstrate that the value in women's cricket and men's cricket can be and should be the same. And a lot of that will depend on our broadcast relationships and other elements going into the future. It is a long-term play. Back in 2019, we only had 18 professional women's players in England. Next year, we'll have nearly 200 professional women's players. We're investing north of £35 million a year into the women's game. We're really excited about it. As I said, much of our participation is being driven forward by the women and girls game. And our next challenge, which we will succeed on, is to ensure that the commercial growth of the game also accelerates, and so we can catch up. But the women's 100 salaries when the competition started 4 years ago were top band of 15,000. It's now at 65,000. So £15,000 a week. We're proud that we're able to sort of lead not just cricket, but global women's team sport in that way. That's our ambition.
We've been asking our listeners and viewers for questions as well, and there are a couple. There are a couple which I'll leave till off air before I put them to
go on,
you.
be brave.
Okay. No, scheduling. Please ask Richard why he talks about protecting the county championship when half of it's played in the winter.
it's not obviously clearly played in the winter. I know what they're saying, in that it's pushed to the edges, or perceived to be the edges. There is a 3.5 week window, 27-day period where the 100 is played, and that is played in August, because that is focused at trying to bring in family environments. And the counties have decided that during that window they will prefer to play one-day cricket rather than championship cricket. What the counties play and when they play it is a reserved matter for the counties. So that's within their gift. I don't think, and those discussions will no doubt resume in the coming years.
Another one on the county championship, and the streaming services. Is that a way that the county game can monetize it and stay healthy and perhaps even begin to thrive again?
Yeah, I think monetization of the streams is a little bit further down the line, but I'd recommend anybody, if you're sitting at home, or dare I say at work, and you want to follow your county team, then just stick on the streams. They're really good quality now. They've got multiple cameras, county championship. It's a great way of following your local county team.
Test cricket in the smaller nations, can it survive? I mean, I just said that in the smaller Test nations, the World Test Championship has given them something to play for. But long term, are you seeing a reduction in the number of Test playing countries? Can it survive in the Caribbean and other countries that lose Test cricket, that lose money playing Test cricket?
I think it comes back to their own model, and you see some member countries, and we've got over 100 member countries in the ICC now. You see some, for most, T20 is the format of choice out of those 100. But Test cricket has a huge appeal, both for the players and spectators, because it is perceived rightly as being the ultimate form of the game, and so you can see why people want to play it. But I think, in truth, countries that want to be successful at Test cricket need to have sufficient resource to have a really good first-class red ball competition domestically. That's really important. You've got to build from the bottom up. I think Test cricket, you can't take shortcuts.
Some of our colleagues have been very cruel and have brought their lunch from the dining room into the commentary box, and it smells absolutely incredible. So I shall accompany you to the dining room, Richard. But before I go, I have to ask you whether you can still enjoy the game, and when you see a cover drive of classic purity from Zach Crawley, whether you still love the, with all that you have to deal with, being questioned by me, and the racism inquiry, and all of the supposedly negative or problematic issues that you have to deal with on a daily basis. Can you still just sit back and enjoy it?
Yes, at times, and this is a good example. It's such a great sport to watch. It's such a great sport to be at with friends and family. It's a real unifying element for communities. You look around us today, and the community of Hamilton has come out, and they've been ably supported by a very large travelling contingent from England, which itself, the Barmy Army are amazing ambassadors for our sport. So yeah, I always make sure I can enjoy things. And the challenges are they're there, but they're really important for us to deal with. And people love the sport. I love the sport, and we just want to make sure that it can be in the healthiest position going forward.
Thank you so much for your time. Let's go and feed ourselves. Thank you very much indeed. That's Richard Gould, the ECB Chief Executive, answering some of your questions, some of my questions, and some of the hard questions as well that won't go away in a hurry.